Thanks for joining us today for the Chorus Daily Briefing. Jim Benton here, and I'm here today with Zach Anderson, the head of revenue with productboard. Hey, Zach, how you doing today?
Hey, Jim. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
How is life and family up in Seattle right now?
Probably the same as everybody else. We are, enjoying our time together as a family, maybe more so than we've had in a long time. And, we're lucky enough to be out in the burbs a bit. So we have a little bit of a backyard where the kids have been, trying to leverage that space as much as possible. And, I think more than anything, trying not to work 7 days a week and 10 hours a day with the computer in front of me all day. But all in all, we're doing great up here.
How's that going?
It's going okay. We've tried to create a little more rhythm at home than we normally would have. So we're doing the best we can for sure.
Is Seattle starting? Is there a date when it reopens? Have they shared any updates?
Not as much. We were a little bit of the epicenter up here in terms of kind of things kicking off, unfortunately, in the United States. So we've been, I think it's 2 months for us up here, which, it's getting a little bit old, but we're hanging in there. And I think the only news I was excited to hear is that they're opening up the state parks. Some boating is starting to happen again with some restrictions. And I think as long as we can get outside this summer, I think we'll be all right. How about for you guys down in the peninsula?
Yeah, they just extended the stay at home till end of May. So we're more of this, which makes sense. And look, I think right now, as long as we're healthy and families are together, people are making the most of it. And
Totally.
how lucky are we to all have Zoom to keep us productive and going. So feel very fortunate and looking forward to helping share data today that's just helping everyone to understand sort of what's happening in the state of SaaS and state of sales. And productboard, remarkable company. I've followed it for quite some time. You've been with them for about a year now. Tell me just a little bit about the company just before we jump into the data.
Yeah, so kind of born out of the typical product founder who didn't really have the tools that they wanted to have in order to run a really effective product organization. So founder and CEO Hubert and the other co-founder Daniel just worked hard to build essentially a new category for product management. So our vision is really to be the product system of record for every digital product. Interestingly enough, we often talk about this. It's strange in a world where products are so critical to everybody's businesses that product teams have never actually had their own tools. Marketing has had Marketo, sales gets Salesforce, and obviously Chorus. Engineering gets Jira and Atlassian, but product has always been using spreadsheets and slides and productivity tools. And so, fundamentally, that's who we work with. We work with some of the best product teams in the world and fundamentally try to help them make products that matter through, user insight and prioritization around key company objectives. And then, of course, sort of getting everybody aligned to that vision via roadmaps and other tools to kind of get everybody on the same page. So, it's been an exciting year. Tons of really exciting customers and just fun to build a new category and to kind of see that take off in the product management world.
Well, congrats. I've been following it for a while and it's about as just awesome SaaS, great UI, integrated to everybody, self-service. And with that, I feel like that's going to give you just incredible insights to share with everybody today from just what you're seeing out there. One setup, we shared yesterday that overall meeting volume for this week is up 3% across all segments. But when we drill into specifically SaaS companies and SaaS revenue teams, since March 9th, we're down about 15% of overall meetings, but we're up almost 7%, week over week. Zach, what are you seeing out there yourself and within your own team?
Yeah, it's actually, your graph here looks very similar to a lot of our graphs as it relates to, kind of volume and pickup. I think what we're seeing is something really similar, that kind of trough in March 30th and April 6th. We've seen a sort of typical uptick on our end. The last 2 weeks have actually been, somewhere in the range of 10 to 12% better in terms of overall meetings booked and volume of activity from our sales team. So the way we're talking about it internally is we sort of reached a little bit of a new normal and we're seeing some signs of life for maybe some increased activity across the sales team. I think sort of one interesting discussion for us potentially is, we've been on a bit of a journey. Our business most of last year was almost exclusively inbound led. And we were very, very heavily reliant on the trial motion, which is still a huge part of, how we want our customers to interact with our product and how they, we want to interact with them from a sales perspective. And so we've seen a bit of a dip in trial volume, but we've also simultaneously been really spinning up a much more robust outbound motion. So kind of trying to do both of those two things in this environment has been a bit of a challenge. And we've definitely seen some impact there, but we were basically in the middle of a transition of inbound only moving to a more diversified sort of sales and go-to-market motion. And timing isn't great for outbound in terms of, being able to measure benchmarks and whatnot, but we're seeing very similar trends in terms of a little bit of a sign of life that we hope continues.
And are you, doing outbound with a BDR combined with sales reps and integrated motion?
Totally. Yeah. So we kind of, as last year ran through, we had mostly just an inbound round robin motion, and we kicked off in January once we hit kind of that magical tipping point of 10 quota holders into proper territories and more of a, SDR plus a, mid-market rep, and then a couple inside sales rep attached to an individual territory, more the pod type of selling mentality. And I think, for us being a relatively new category, we certainly found, customers were obviously finding product board and being successful, but it was time for us to be more aggressive, sort of going out, finding those similar customers that we knew would be a great fit for product board. So yeah, that's kind of the model that we've adopted today.
One more question on this. You're talking to a real outbound type guy. Look, the dream is inbound for all of us. And now that I've worked in both systems, I still go back to outbound. The idea that we go out there and help identify these companies and bring them magic. I've seen just worlds open in massive ways. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that the things are opening up as you're going outbound?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, for us, outbound was kind of the word I used earlier, was a way to diversify who we were speaking to and how we were going about the market, right? With an inbound motion, what we found is it was a little bit more bottoms up driven. Lots of product managers and those kind of early adopters coming to find product board. And then we'd work with them to figure out kind of what a larger implementation might look like, or what a larger opportunity might look like in the company. And so outbound for us was a way to sort of, be able to target more specifically certain personas that we knew we had a great message for and that our early customers had proven the value for. And so, yeah, we view it as additive. And at the pace we're trying to grow, frankly, we have to have outbound. We have a nice trajectory with inbound, but outbound is just kind of another layer that we could add to the overall business that is really a key part of our strategy in 2020 as we think about, again, I'd say more aggressively attacking the market and going and finding great product orgs and telling them kind of the product board story.
No, I love it. I mean, that's what gets me out of bed, gets our team out of bed, but it's what it's all about. I used to kid with people that you could have the perfect company across the street, but in some of these inbound motions, you won't even talk to them.
Totally.
And outbound, it's just about helping win the market and prove that value. One of the key outbound is dials. So speaking of outbound, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen in the data is that when you look at March 9th versus April 20th, cold calls are down 67%. And they're down 3% even week over week. And so there's different reasons for this. People are working from home and numbers have changed. But I'm curious, is this match what you're seeing, and how are you thinking about your approach to outbound right now?
Yeah, it's actually, this is probably one part where we're a little bit different in that, because we were going through a kind of our outbound motion is really only 6 months old in total. And so we went from 0 to 7 outbound SDRs in the last 6 months, a lot of them still ramping and onboarding. And so for us, our overall volume is higher. Our cold calling volume is significantly higher, not only as a percentage of what the team is focused on, but also the volume of reps that we brought on from an outbound perspective. So I think, we're sort of lucky in a way in that our primary buyer is a product manager who doesn't typically get barraged with a lot of sales calls. They're not a traditional group that's buying a lot of software. And so we actually find a pretty healthy, sort of overall mix of cold calling for our team and a receptiveness from our buyer in that we're hyper-focused on kind of who those personas are. And they haven't been as beat down as potentially some sales and marketing and IT buyers have been in terms of overall messaging. And so we're seeing some success there. And I think we're trying to actually get people on the phone, just like everybody. We're being creative and flexible with our pricing. We want to find a way to just get people onto product board in this environment. And if we could just get them on the phone, we feel like we can have a much more candid conversation about, hey, if we can solve your problem today, let's not worry as much about like, how do we have this great average deal size for our first engagement together? It's just, how do we get started and how do we bring you onto the platform and get going? I think that's kind of our strategic shift. But yeah, we see a little bit of the opposite in terms of our focus on cold calling, and still with some success there too.
And for those that are struggling with cold calls right now, is there any particular systems you've used or approaches that have helped to keep that volume up? I understand the audience is receptive, but anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we're using all the same tools. Probably a lot of people are. We use outreach in terms of tracking, and we're trying to be creative in terms of our overall messaging. And what does that first meeting excellence look like for us in terms of why they should be talking to us, why they should get their team together? And again, for us, good outbound leads to good inbound and good trial activity. So we tend to try to measure, are we first connecting with them via outbound, and then are we seeing them come through in a trial? And when we see that connection between outbound and trial, we know we've got a customer who's really interested in Product Board that we should, make sure we invest a lot of time and resources in.
Zach, from a messaging standpoint, what's different about the outbound message today than where it was 8 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think the message, well, first off, the strategy. So I think with cold calling, I would say we kicked off the year with this overall mission with Outbound of how can we use Outbound as a way to go talk maybe to more product leadership, as opposed to what had come inbound, which was more product managers and senior product managers. And so our original strategy was really to focus kind of moving up market a bit in terms of our value proposition towards product leaders. And I think the strategy has been, those product leaders are obviously bogged down with a lot of really, compelling internal challenges that I'm sure we're all facing in our businesses. And so for us, part one of the strategy was just to continue to broaden the scope. So we've sort of moved back to, hey, we just want to talk to anyone in the product organization who wants to talk to Product Board. So we sort of moved away from just product leadership focus into more practitioner, individual contributor focused PMs and others. So I think that was one. And then two, the general sort of messaging of both, our outbound from an email perspective and from a cold calling perspective has really just been about, even if now is not the time, we'd love to just establish a relationship. We'd love to learn about your product organization and your problems and your process. And we'd love to just introduce you to Product Board. And if now is not the right time for us to talk about something, as it relates to an opportunity to partner together, let's do that down the road, and let's have that discussion in the future. And so I think we've shifted towards how much stage 2 pipeline are we creating to just how many of our customers are we connecting with, how many customers are we getting meetings with, and we think that'll just build future demand for Product Board as we go into a little bit more of an uptick in terms of this overall market environment.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's consistent, by the way, on some of the data we're seeing on the AE side. So specifically looking at what percentage of the time is spent on first meetings, up 4% since pre-COVID. It's 33.4% of all meetings now are first meetings, which is the highest we've seen, since early January. In terms of you're going wider, you mentioned that, not just going to the leaders, but going wider. Are you finding that that's converting into opportunities? Is that getting you into the right conversations?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, in a lot of ways, it sort of mimics what we always had with inbound. And we're just now sort of taking that same path with our outbound motion too. And frankly, we've even changed the incentive structure for our team to be more meeting focused as opposed to kind of pipeline focused. We've switched around our quota structure in the interim around what had typically been your typical dollar-based quota for an AE. We actually moved that just towards a customer acquisition target for the next 2 months. And so we're really just trying to focus on how can we go, tell our story to as many people as possible. And for our product too, it really is a productivity tool for people working remotely. At the end of the day, it's a utility where all of the product information is stored, where remote PMs can engage with one another on what to prioritize and what are our customers saying about our products and how can we share a roadmap with our internal stakeholders. And so there's definitely a value proposition for the product team in general, especially given the environment, to be using something like Product Board. But we've really just sort of moved all of our targets and focus on meetings and acquisition of customers way more so than moving up market and, start trying to tackle larger opportunities with larger product teams.
I think it's awesome feedback for everyone listening. You're seeding the market. You're doing what the market will respond to today. And as we've all seen in SaaS, expansion when you have a good product can be explosive when the times sort of bounce back. Is that consistent with what, product board saying?
Totally. I mean, I think, again, sort of harkens back to our roots a bit we know we have a great product. We've always felt comfortable with people coming in, signing up with a credit card via self-serve, and we are super confident in our customer success motion to help get them up and running and successful. And we've seen that work. And I think now, I think the way we've been talking about things internally is, you sort of run in these growth modes. And even as challenging as this environment is, it's an opportunity to step back, slow down, and kind of really think about your strategy for growth and where you want to build that and how you want to build that. And it gives you a little bit of a free ticket for the next couple months to experiment and try a few things. And that's how we're thinking about it is, we've made a bunch of changes. We've been, sort of strategic about how we want to think about it, but we've also said, hey, let's just go try a bunch of stuff for the next 2 months here. Let's be really good about understanding what's happening. Let's create some creative on-ramping offers for customers so that it's easy for them to join and it's flexible for them to get started with product board. And, maybe this is actually a better way to grow than what we had planned originally. And we won't know until we try it. And so trying to be really, again, great at the reporting side of things, but it's an opportunity we shouldn't pass up in terms of our ability to slow down and try some things that maybe we wouldn't have been able to try if it was just grow quarter over quarter.
Well, I appreciate the deep thinking. I think the experimentation is gonna lead to good fruit. You're also leading the customer success team. Talk to me just a little bit and share with us what you're seeing, how the success motion is changing. And as you're driving more conversations, what are you hearing from customers today?
Yeah, it's, similar stuff in some ways in that, what customers are looking for is a little bit of help and flexibility in a lot of situations. And so, we tend to bracket our customers not only by kind of their overall health of their usage of product board, but also, what level of engagement they get from us. So we have kind of a 4-tiered customer success motion, whereas tier 1 is kind of your high touch, executive level, larger deployments down to tier 4, which is where you don't really have a CSM. You have somebody who's doing a lot of one-to-many communication to you from a CS marketing perspective. And so we went through each of those different segments internally, each tier, and really came up with how should we communicate to them when they have a challenge? What are we willing to do for them if they're struggling either with payment terms or we have a renewal coming up? And so we basically came up with a sort of segmentation-oriented strategy for, kind of 2 things. How do we prevent future churn from customers by making sure they know we'll take care of them and we'll do things we can to support them in the short term and medium term, which we hope will buy us some, credibility with them as a partner. And then for those that are really struggling, trying to be as good of a partner as we can by offering, very flexible payment terms and, finding a way to pause their subscription. And, I think the thing we try to focus on is who is really getting value out of product board, and they may be struggling in the current environment. I hate to see those types of customers leave product board just because of the situation. We can be flexible. We're in a great position to support them. And so we're trying to do everything we can to, create those, again, sort of segment-oriented offers and structures to help customers through a tough time.
I think it's fantastic. I think many of us are thinking about that. So just appreciate you sharing the approach, the segmentation that you're doing. One last data point. We've showed that discovery meetings are up 7%. We've looked at also the response and the changes here, but this is where we're looking at specifically change week over week. We're up 7% from being down 2% last week. Well, I guess one question for you is we're seeing an increase in leadership in these meetings. Are you yourself being pulled into a lot more meetings than you were pre-COVID?
Yeah, I think so. And I think part of it is to articulate some of the messages we're talking about today, right? I think it's to help empower the AEs to know what we can and can't do. I think one of the things that it's always hard if you're an AE or a CSM is know, what am I allowed to help this customer with and how much flexibility do I have? And we've tried to create that structure. But yeah, obviously, I think one of the goals of getting on as many calls with customers as we can now, whether it's somebody who's struggling and might be wanting to churn from product board, which we hope never happens, or somebody who really likes our product but is struggling to find out how to get the budget and move forward with us. I think, I'm joining a lot of those calls, so is other sales and success leadership on my team to really just help, sort of guide the customer through what's possible and what's not possible. And like I said, we're we're willing to be open and constructive with customers to try to find that balance of, you know, how do we get you going today, and we can make this up in future discussions and hopefully over the length of our relationship together. So yeah, from our perspective, I think it's really giving our internal team more support to know what's possible, to make sure that we still try to do the right thing by customers, you know, in this kind of both acquisition time and also those that are struggling from a churn perspective. How do we make sure they know, again, we're capable of supporting them during the time?
I think that's right. And by the way, this stat specifically is the follow-up meetings that we're looking at. So we saw
Sure.
an increase in follow-up meetings. One last question on that. Are you finding that given that you're being more flexible, you're moving quicker, are you getting faster sales cycles as a result of that? You know, given all the flexibility that you've mentioned.
Yeah, we are. It's you know, some of the newer initiatives we have are still new, and so we're still kind of waiting to see what happens. We've had a really fast sales cycle, just in general, being that we've been so, you know, 14-day trial driven. Our sales cycles are 30 days for our inside team and closer to 60 days for our mid-market team. So we have the benefit of a really, you know, fast moving deal cycle, even in our segment and our space. And so the hope is, I think we haven't really positioned a lot of what we're focused on to increase sales cycle. It's really just to increase conversion on the stuff that is coming to us. And so the sales cycle length was never really a challenge for us. And, you know, obviously shorter is better, but not really a big area of focus. It was really about, you know, if we're going to see a little bit less, you know, sort of organic demand coming for us, how do we make sure we just do the best we can with what we do have from inbound, from outbound, to make sure that, you know, if people are interested, let's not make price and process barriers to getting started with product board. And so for us, less of a focus on kind of the deal cycle time, even though we'll be watching it, but, you know, less of a concern.
Gotcha. Zach, the team sounds healthy. I love that you're doing a lot of changes. I mean, for those that maybe haven't taken as bold of changes, these experiments seem like they've been really fruitful. It's helping the team, it's helping the customers. So congrats on just all the moving pieces, and, you know, appreciate you sharing those with us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to both watch the briefings and pick up a few things myself. And yeah, thankful to be able to come on and chat a little bit about product board and what we're up to. And yeah, appreciate the time. It's good to catch up.
Yeah, likewise. Tomorrow I've got Connor Burt, president of Lessonly, joining. So that should be a great conversation. And happy Tuesday. Zach, thanks so much, and wish you all the best.
Yeah, stay safe. Take care. We'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Cheers.
Take care, Jim.